Hey, welcome to the series of everything you need to know about Python in simplest possible way. In our previous video, we have discussed about lists, right? We have discussed about what are lists and we have also discussed about how to create list. So we have discussed that list acts like a container, right? So inside of a list, we can store whatever the elements that we wanted. So what about accessing the elements inside of a list? So when we wanted to access a specific element inside of a list, we need to have some mechanism to access, right? So one of the way that we can access through indexing. So here you can carefully see we are having these elements inside of a list. Consider this array is as a list, and inside of this container, inside of this list, we are having the elements 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So we can access by indexing in two different ways. One is positive indexing, which starts from left side and goes till right side. So another way that we can access through negative indexing. Here we can access from the right side to left side here. So when we wanted to access through positive indexing, the first index that we are considering, which is 0, which means that but if we wanted to access this particular 10, we will be starting from 0, and if we wanted to access this particular 20, we can mention the index which is 2. Like that, we will be starting with index 0 and we will be going till how many number of elements that we have inside of a list minus 1. Here you can see we are having 5 elements inside of this list, right? So here when we come to this index, we are having only 4, because as we are started with 0, we are having number of elements minus 1, which is nothing but 4 here. So by mentioning this particular positive indexing, we can able to access this particular elements from left to right. So if you wanted to access from right to left, let's say you don't want to count, let's say you wanted to access this particular 40 and you don't want to count all of these elements 0, 1, 2, 3, like this, you don't want to count this. So for that, you can access from right side also. So when you come from right side, you are having this particular 40 in the second index itself from right. So for that reason, you can use this particular negative indexing also. When you wanted to use this particular negative indexing, you will be counting this particular indexing from the right side and you will be starting the index from minus 1. So as and when the elements are increasing, this particular minus count is also increasing. Let's say you who wanted to access this particular 40, instead of mentioning this particular 3, you can also mention this particular minus 2. So if you wanted to access this particular 30, you can mention minus 3 also. So like this, you can able to access elements inside of a list through positive indexing and through negative indexing. So we have understood how to access the elements inside of a list theoretically, right? Let us go ahead and see with the program clearly how to access these elements. So we will be considering the same example of what we have inside of the list, which is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So for that, what I will be doing is that I will take list 1 here, and inside of this list, I will be considering 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50 here. So these are the same elements that we have seen inside of this particular example, right? So for that reason, I am taking the same example here. So in order to access this particular 10, as we have discussed, we can access through positive indexing, right? So for that reason, I am mentioning list 1. So in order to access this container, we need to mention the variable. So this is considered as variable, right? List 1 is a variable. By using this list 1 only, we need to access the elements, right? So this list is having the pointing into this, right? So by using this variable only, we can able to access instead of the elements. So here, if you wanted to access this particular 10, I need to mention 0. That is what we have seen in the example also, right? So for 10, we have index 0. So now, if I print this particular result which is accessing this particular index 0, and if I execute this, you can able to see the result. We are getting the result which is 10 by just mentioning this particular index which is 0. Let's say if we wanted to access this particular 40, what we need to do, we need to mention, if you wanted to come from left side which is positive indexing, what we need to mention, This is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, right? This 40 is having index 3. So for that reason, what I need to do? I need to mention index 3 here. And if I execute this, you can able to see the result what we have expected, which is 40. So we have understood how we can access the elements by positive indexing from left to right, right? So we will be accessing the elements from right to left, which is of negative indexing. Let us see how we can access this particular same 40 by negative indexing. So negative indexing starts from right. So this particular 50 is having -1 and this particular 40 having -2, right? So for that reason, what I will be doing is that I will mention this particular index as -2 here. And if I execute this, we are getting 40, that what we have expected by simply mentioning -2 here. So I hope you can able to understand the difference between positive indexing and negative indexing. Positive indexing starts from left and go till right, and negative indexing start from right and go towards left. So if you wanted to access this particular, let's say 10 here by negative indexing, what we need to do? We need to mention whatever the list name that we are having, and inside of this list name we need to mention the index. This is -1, -2, -3, -4 and -5. If I mention -5 here and if I execute this, we can able to see the result, which is 10. If I wanted to access what element that we have inside of the first index from right side, so for that reason I will mention the first index from right side, which is nothing but -1 here. And if I execute this, we can able to see 50. That is what we have here, right? So by this, I hope you can able to clearly understand how to access the elements inside of a list by positive indexing and by negative indexing. So one more thing we need to consider here, which is slicing. Slicing means we can able to access some range of values inside of this particular list. Let's say if you wanted to access this particular 20, 30, 40, you can access by slicing. So let us go ahead and see how we can use slicing in order to access range of values inside of a list. So for that reason, I will just print this particular list here so that we can able to see the list inside here itself in order to go upward every time, right? So here, if you wanted to access this particular 20, 30, 40, what I will be doing is that I will first mention print, and here we need to mention this particular list name, that is list 1 here. Inside of this list, we need to use this particular uh, square braces to access indexing, right? So inside of this, what we need to mention, this is of index 1, right? 20 is present at index 1 here. So I will mention 1 and we need to go till 40. 40 is having index 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? If I mention 3 here, before mentioning, we need to mention a colon here. So this colon, which is like before this colon, we will be mentioning this particular start. This one is considered as a start, and after this colon, we will be mentioning the stop. So where you wanted to stop. So we wanted to stop at this particular 40. So for that reason, the index is 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So if I mention 3, so if I execute this, we are only getting 20, 30. The reason is because as we have mentioned this particular end, which is 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3. So we have mentioned correctly itself, but the functionality of this slicing is having little different. So it will don't go till the end, till the stop, that what we have mentioned. Here we have mentioned 3, the index 3, right? It don't go till index 3. It will only go whatever the index that we have mentioned -1 itself. So 3 minus 1, which is 2. So it will be stopped in 30 itself. Because of that reason, we are only getting 20 and 30. So as keeping that in mind, we need to add one more index for that, and we need to mention it. So if you wanted to go till 40, we need to add this particular, for this particular index, we need to add +1 and we need to give that as a stop. And for that, I am giving 4 here, so that if I execute this, we can able to get 20, 30, 40. So this is what the functionality of this particular stop. Keep in mind, so this is the most of the problem that everyone do. Stop need to be mentioned +1. the whatever the index that we have. So like this we can able to access the elements whatever the range that we wanted. So let's say you wanted to access all these elements by this particular indexing. So what you can do is that you can just simply mention this particular colon, and if you execute this we can able to get all of these elements, right? So like that you can able to get. So one more thing that we have inside of this particular slicing is we are getting whatever the range that we have mentioned, right? One more thing we have, which is nothing but step here. So we can start with 10 and we can skip this particular 20 and we can go for 30, and we can skip this particular 40 and go to 50. Like that we can skip some elements and go for the next elements. So that is what we will be considering, which is nothing but step. So in order to mention step we need to mention one more colon here that you can see here, and after this particular colon we need to mention step. By default step is having 1. If you wanted to change the step we can change the step also. So here I will be mentioning 2, and if I execute this you can able to see we are getting 10 and we are skipping this particular 20, which means we are putting step 2, right? So it don't consider this particular value, it step 2 times. So this is 1, this is 2. So for that reason it will go here and you can see the result, we are getting 30. After that it will jump 2 steps, we are skipping this and we are going for this particular 50. So that's the reason we are getting 10, 30 and 50 by mentioning this particular step here. So if you wanted to access this particular list in the reverse direction, which means 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, we can do that by mentioning the step as -1, which means we are telling we need to access that that values in the negative direction. So for that we can just mention this particular -1, and if I execute this we can able to see the result, we are getting 50, 40, 30, 20 and 10. So like this we can able to access the elements inside of the list. So we have seen positive slicing, right? So we will be seeing the negative slicing as well. So for that what we can mention is that we are mentioning list 1. Let's say I wanted to access this particular 20, 30, 40 itself by negative indexing, right? So we know the negative indexing, right? So we wanted to start from here, right, which is nothing but 20. So for that we need to count from right. So for that reason this will be having -1, -2, -3 and -4, the starting value which is -4 here. So we will be starting at -4 and we need to go till this particular 40, which is nothing but -1 and -2 here. If we mention -2 and if I execute this, we still are getting 20 and 30. That we what we have seen previously, right? We should not mention the exact value. If we mention the exact value it will be reduced by -1. Because of that reason we are getting only 20, 30, which means that though we have mentioned -2 here but it is considered as -3. So because of that reason we are only getting 20 and 30. And if I mention -1 here and we can able to see all the result, which is 20, 30, 40, that what we wanted to access in this range, right? So by mentioning this negative indexing also we can able to slice the list and get the element that what we wanted. So I hope you can able to understand this slicing as well, positive slicing and negative slicing. Apart from that we can able to put a step here also. So if I put 2 here and you can able to see the 30 is skipped because we are mentioning 2 here. So if I mention -1 here we will be getting the result in a reverse direction. So you should not mention this particular -1. The reason is because we cannot travel from -4, which is here, and to this one. So if you wanted to get that values in the reverse direction we need to change these values. So how? I need to put 1 here, I need to put 4 here, and if I execute this we can able to get the result which is in the reverse direction. So previously why I am getting the result as empty string is because this is the previous what I have mentioned, right? So why I am mentioning why we are getting this particular empty string is because we have mentioned -1 here, right? So which means that it need to be traveled in the negative direction, which means it need to be started from here, which is -1 and go to -4. That cannot be done, right? So for that reason only we are getting as a empty list here. So I hope you can able to understand how we can able to index the values in order to get whatever the element that we have specifically. So apart from that, we have also seen the slicing. So one more aspect that we have and that we need to consider while indexing, which is nothing but the nested list, which means that a list inside of a list, how we can access the elements in the nested list using indexing. So let us go ahead and see that as well. So let's say I will take this particular list to 2 here, and inside of this particular list 2, what I will be having is that I will have 1, instead of 1 I will have 10, 20, 30, 40, and after that I will be having a list. So inside of this list, what I will be having a 50, 60, and 70 here. So after that I will have 80 here. So now if I print this particular index, which is this one, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I print list 2 index 4 here, and if I execute this, we are getting this whole list, right? So we are getting all the values inside of a list. So that's how we can able to access this particular list. So if we wanted to access this particular 60, let's say we wanted to access this particular 60. So in general, what you may count is that you will count from here 0, 1, 2, 3, which is 4, this is 4, this is 5. So you will mention 5 here, right? So if you mention 5, we will get only 80. The reason is because this whole list as considered as a single element, not as a individual elements 50, 60, 70. So as it is considered as a single element, we have mentioned 5 and we cannot get this particular list, this particular index, this particular list having the index which is 4. So after that we are having index 5 which is 80. That is the reason we cannot access this particular 60. So in order to access this particular 60, first we need to mention the index for this particular list. So that index is 4. After that we are getting this particular list, right? So we know how to access the elements inside of a list. So in order to access in this particular list element which is 60, we need to mention this particular index, which is this 50 having 0 index, this 60 having first index. So for that reason I will mention 1 here, and if I execute this, we can able to get this particular 60. And if we want this particular 50, we need to mention 0 here, and like that we can able to access the elements inside of a list also, so which is considered as a nested list. So the only thing we need to remember is that when we are accessing a list inside of a list, the whole list as considered as a single element. When we wanted to access the elements inside of a nested list, we need to again mention this particular index operator, and we need to mention whatever the value that we wanted to access, which is nothing but the index that we wanted to access. So like this we can able to access this particular values in the nested list also. Let's say I will be having a string, let's say not just a list, any iterable that we have inside this particular list as a considered as a single element. Let's say I have this particular like here, and by default if I mention 4 here, if I execute this, we will be getting like as a single element. So if we wanted to access, let's say L here, we need to again mention the index operator, and we need to mention the index. And if I execute this, you can able to see the first index that we have inside of this particular string, which is nothing but the 0 here, which is nothing but L here. So like that we can able to access the elements which are the iterables inside of this particular list by using another index through nested indexing. So I hope you can able to understand. So I feel like we have discussed so many things, right? So let us go ahead and conclude whatever the things that we have discussed. Here we are starting with the indexing and slicing, and we have seen initially what exactly we can do with indexing. Through positive indexing, we can access the elements inside of a list from left to right. With the negative indexing, we can access the elements in the list from right to left. So apart from that, we have seen how we can do in the code itself. So we have seen the positive indexing, we have seen the negative indexing. So apart from that, we have seen one of the important aspects, which is slicing. to get the range of elements inside of a list. So that we have seen through this particular uh, uh, slicing operations, right? So we have seen the negative slicing also. So apart from that, we have seen the nested list and iterable inside of a list. So I hope you can able to understand all the concept that what we have explained here. So if you wanted to access the detailed notes that I will be preparing for this video, I will be mentioning this particular link in the description. You can access the detailed notes for this list indexing and slicing. So I hope you have found this video interesting. If that is true, hit the like button. In the next video, we will be seeing some of the important concept. So to stay updated with my latest videos, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications to all so that whenever I upload any video, you will get the notification. So thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.